Welcome to City of Keene in Focus. Thanks so much for listening. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our fourth episode of City of Keene in Focus. I am here with Elizabeth Dragon. It is Friday morning. We had a couple of late nights this week
Yes,
with some long meetings. So
yeah, it's been a busy week for sure. We had a special MSFI meeting on Wednesday night, and then we had our regular council meeting last night. Although last night they sort of expedited the meeting because they were all anxious to go to their holiday party. So at least we were able to kind of move through the business of the evening relatively quickly. To clarify, the MSFI meeting that we had on Wednesday, those decisions of the committee will not be heard by the full council until the next council meeting. So it would have been too quick of a turnaround to get it onto the agenda and then have the agenda posted. So it'll be at the next meeting. And so the next council meeting is January 2nd. So the final design for the downtown project will be on that meeting. They will have a conversation at FOP, which we'll talk a little bit about and sort of what that means for the timing of the actual construction project itself. But to start with last night's council meeting, there were a number of items on there. There's one item that came in as a communication from Councilor Haas, and we've done this in the past. He's looking for committees, so city committees, to report once a year on their activities and the things that they're focused on. Last time I think we did that was a couple of years ago, and typically what happens is, depending upon the committee, it will go to the appropriate council committee. So depending on what that focus is, the work would be spread out between the committees.
So to clarify, this is referring to all the city committees like Partners City Committee, the Human Rights Committee, and all of those smaller committees,
That's
correct?
That's right, okay. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. So there's, a number of, the Conservation Commission is one. There's a number of boards and commissions that the mayor and council appoint people to, and Council Haas is just interested in hearing from them once a year. So that letter was referred to FOP, so that will be on the next FOP agenda, which will be January 9th, and they'll discuss, how they want to do that, if they want to do that. We're going to recommend that we do it the same way we've done it in the past, and that is, have the committees come to the various council committees depending on their subjects. Last night was pretty interesting. We tried something new. So other cities and towns often use a consent agenda. So basically the work of the committee that's being referred to the full council for vote, they would vote on them in blocks. So yesterday when we were having our agenda review meeting, we talked about, why aren't we using a consent agenda? It certainly would speed things up. And if someone wants to pull an item off the consent agenda, they could do that. We tried that last night a little.
I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was a really efficient way to handle the business that needed to get done. But also, if a counselor felt strongly about a certain issue, that counselor certainly had the opportunity to say, hey, actually, I think this item needs a little bit more discussion. Yeah. So it wasn't like anything was getting disregarded, but it just seemed like a really good, efficient way to do that.
Yeah, I know. It was a little clunky because it was the first time we'd done that, and it was a bit of a new concept, and so we kind of sprung it on the counselors, but I think everybody did great with it, and several things were taken off the consent agenda to be discussed separately, and so I think we might see that again. So in terms of the number of items on the agenda last night, I'm just scanning through real quick to see. I think that most of the items were accepted as, there was a few, file as informational, and then it was really between FOP recommendations and MSFI in those items. So the reduction of speed limit on Upper Roxbury, that was approved as carryout intent, which means they're agreeing with the committee's recommendation, but the action really is just for the staff to look at it more. The request that came in from the petitioner was to reduce the speed more than what's allowed by law, but we are going to do some work and take a look at what we might be able to do in this area. The old Sullivan Road intersection, that's been a conversation back and forth with MSFI and the state of New Hampshire. We've had some serious accidents at this intersection. Unfortunately, time and weather hasn't been on our side as we've been debating what to do with that. We came up with an interim solution that DOT agreed to. We needed to add some line paintings to this area, and we couldn't get it done before the weather, and I don't know if we'll be able to do it until the spring.
I think this late fall, early winter season has been a little snowier than anyone anticipated. So
yeah, and I mean, it's just the temperature drops, and that makes it difficult to do painting. And the day that we had it scheduled for, it actually rained, of course, and so we weren't able to squeeze it in. But as soon as the weather warms, we'll definitely be sure to get out there and get that painting done. But it really is just an interim solution. Because the longer-term solution does require some investment in that area. So we'll be working with DOT to see if we can make some additional improvements. We've gotten another Invest NH grant. We accepted it last night, and this grant was put together by our Community Development Department. It's a planning and zoning grant to expand what's called 79E. It's a tax incentive program. So here in the city, we have a portion that's closely tied to the downtown that is eligible for 79E. And 79E, basically, it's the ability to get a tax break for a number of years if you are making an improvement to your property that qualifies. And so there's a lot of regulations, but just to make it as simple as possible to explain is the work that you do to improve the property, that increased value doesn't get taxed for, usually it's up to 5 years. There are several things that the property has to meet in order to qualify. But what we're doing right now with this grant is taking a look at, first of all, should our district be expanded? And then secondly, there was a change in the law to allow residential projects to also qualify. And so this grant will help us bring on a consultant to look at what other ways we might be able to use 79E to encourage housing development in the city or even rehab. So I'm excited about this. I'm happy they were able to get the grant funds and looking forward to working with a consultant to see how we may continue to encourage housing. Then we did talk about moving money around. So this was confusing to the council a little bit, but we've been doing the skate park project, but we'd also been doing the Pat Russell Park project, and then we also had the Findings Building demolition project. They were all tied together in terms of funding, and when we first went out to bid for the Findings demo, we didn't have enough money from the Invest NH grant, and so we had to move some of the money around in the overall project so that we could, in fact, move forward with a contract to take down that building. And I know that everyone's excited to get that Findings Building down. So last night they did that. They moved around the money that was needed for us to be able to move forward with that contractor. The other thing that we talked about, we did some professional services contracts, for one for engineering services on Key Road for some drainage work we're doing, and then one for some engineering services for our stormwater lining program. And then last night during city manager comments, I talked about a recent award we received. And I even brought the award with me so that I could share it with the city council. It was very exciting. This award, it's called the Housing Champion Award, and we were given this from the state of New Hampshire. It took a bit of effort for community development to put that application together. Both Mary Bruner and Evan Clements worked on this for quite some time because they needed to go through and articulate all the work we've done here in the city to encourage housing and housing development. And there's a lot. So they did that. And one of the things that we also were scored on in this grant was just our investment in public infrastructure. So our roads, our water, our sewer, the fact that we have a capital plan for all of those things, and we have an asset management plan, a maintenance plan, all of those things helped us really get the maximum number of points on this application. In fact, only 18 communities in the state of New Hampshire were awarded this Housing Champion Award. And then of those 18, only 5 scored above 100. So that meant we got this little star on our award. But what's really cool is the city of Keene's application was the highest scoring application in the state. So
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're super stoked about this. There was so much hard work
Yeah.
that went into this, and a lot, I think, that has been worked on for a really long time. All of the adjustments to our zoning and our code to make housing just that much more supported by the city. So we're really, really excited about this. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's great. We highlighted things like the cottage court overlay project, which is very creative. It's not, I don't think anybody's doing this, and if they are, they're doing it differently, but it's a great way to create some infill for housing. And so we had a lot to talk about on that application, which really helped us score quite well. What else is really cool about this is, so the way InvestNH has structured their program for the upcoming year is you had to be a housing champion in order to apply for InvestNH infrastructure dollars. And so whatever pot of money they put towards this program, there'll be 18 of us competing for it because there was only 18 in the state. So that's kind of cool.
Yay.
Yay. So last night also they had some ordinances, and one of them it has gone back and forth numerous times. We've held multiple public hearings, and finally last night they adopted the ordinance related to gaming facilities. And so a lot of work went into that ordinance. Really have to recognize not only the fourth floor community development office, but our PLD committee, our joint PLD committee, and our PLD committee chair, Councilor Bosley, who did a ton of work on that. So it's nice to have now all done and on the books. Not that we expect a bunch of gaming applications in the near future, because there's been a lot of changes at the state level, but at least now we have defined what is a gaming facility and where in the city they can be located by right. And so I think that was great. The other thing last night they adopted in terms of ordinances were a couple of parking cleanup ordinances. So we had changed about a month ago the winter ordinance to allow for overnight parking in the downtown, but there was a summer section of the parking ordinance that still needed to be cleaned up and addressed, and so they did that last night. And so it talks about, instead of saying winter and summer, we now talk about maintenance periods and winter emergencies. And so last night the maintenance period restrictions were created, which allows for the Public Works Director, I think 3 days in advance, to say that they're going to shut down parking. And it could be in a lot, it could be in the downtown area for a period of time to do whatever maintenance they are going to do. And in addition to that, last night, and this hasn't gotten a lot of attention, I'm surprised it hasn't gotten a lot of attention, is the Juneteenth free parking.
Yeah, which is exciting.
It's very exciting. There's been confusion in the past because it's a federal holiday, but many of the communities haven't adopted it as a holiday. And so as a result of that, people would get confused as to whether or not they should be putting money in the meters. And we'd had people in the past get tickets. And so we just said, we should address this. Juneteenth should be a free parking day. And now it is.
That's great. And to clarify, I believe it's still not a city holiday,
That's
but
correct.
It is a parking.
It is a parking
free
holiday.
Parking holiday.
That's
Yeah.
correct. It's a start.
Yeah,
Yes.
which is great.
Yeah. I think it will be appreciated because it really has been confusing for people. On those free parking days, though, we do still require people to keep to the limits of time, and so you can't park there all day. In many areas of the downtown, you can only park for a couple hours, but we do have some long-term lots available, but all those time limits still apply.
Great. And I know the Human Rights Committee often holds events on
Yes.
Juneteenth, and there's a lot of community events on Juneteenth. So this is awesome that there is this parking holiday so that people can attend those. There's a lot of really, really great events that happen that day. So
Yeah, I agree. And so we made some cleanup changes to our personnel ordinance last night. Most of the changes were basically deleting law. Often we reference law, but the problem with that is law changes. So if you don't change your personnel policies to change the law, doesn't mean that you can just say, oh, I'm going to follow what's in my personnel policy. You have to follow what's in the law. And so that can be really confusing. So where we can, we eliminated some of those references to law that has changed since the last time we updated this. We also went through and put in some gender neutral language. We addressed retirement language. So right now at the city, we have a benefit where you can get, I believe it's up to 50% of your sick time if you qualify at the time you retire. And so when the law changed for the state retirement system, that created tiers of employees. So depending on when you were hired, you could potentially get your sick time or not. And so we tried to make that equal last night, and the council adopted that. And so now I think that that will be a benefit to the employees here. And then they did talk a little bit about Class 6 roads and private roads last night. This is something the council has talked about a few times because we've had people interested in building houses on a Class 6 or a private road, and we had this old policy that really didn't make sense anymore. So they updated that, and it's really just provides some guidance to the city council, things that they should be asking and thinking about when a request like that comes in. So the other thing I want to talk about, Asa, is this special MSFI meeting we had this week.
Oh, it was a big one.
It was a long one, that's for sure. And so we had multiple topics on there, and all of them were interesting, but the big topic of the night was the downtown project. And we are at the point of final design, which is exciting. I have to say I celebrated a little at the end of that meeting because this has been a long process. So at that meeting, they went through all of the final design elements, which include things like types of benches in different places in the downtown, types of pavement material or sidewalk material or crossing materials, the style of lights, whether or not to have a shade structure in Railroad Square. They looked at an entryway for Railroad Square and what that might look like. One of the cool things that came out of that conversation is the bricks that are currently in Railroad Square were donated, I think maybe back in the 80s. And we were looking for a way to keep some of them so that we keep that, alive in Railroad Square. And the design of the entryway right now that's moving forward from the committee includes some of those bricks. So that was kind of a cool way to do that. It is Railroad Square after all, so we should have some railroad tracks. And so they talked about what sort of design they would like. And the design that MSFI chose are actually railroad tracks.
I love that.
Yeah, I know. And potentially donated from New Hampshire DOT. And so hopefully it will be a kind of a cool feature in Railroad Square to recognize our history. And that train tracks actually did run through there. And so it's a cool feature. The other features that we talked about, the Central Square, we talked about what sort of pavement or treatment would be on the Central Square paths as well. And I will tell you that for the most part, MSFI really chose concrete where possible. It wears the best. It's easiest to maintain. And then where they wanted to add some aesthetics, they would add some stamped concrete options. And then they weren't a fan of pavers at the committee, and I don't think the Public Works Director was either. But he did talk about including some accents in the Central Square and in Railroad Square using pavers sparingly. I suspect we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. And then earlier in the evening, there was a request that came in from Tim Pipp of Bees Teas. He had written a letter to the city council suggesting that they put a banner, an over-the-street banner, down by Ted's. Now, this would have to be a very large banner because it's a wide street. So we have taken a look at what it would require to put up a banner like that. We would need a pulley system and some poles to support a banner that would be blowing in the wind. So we do have a little bit of research more to do on that topic. So I think right now that will be something we talk about at a future meeting, but it is something that they're interested in. I know some of the businesses are interested in having these over-the-street banners. You will see them sometimes in Concord, and they'll be advertising an event that's happening in the downtown. And so, the businesses seem to be interested in doing something like that. So more to come on that.
I am excited to hear that the recommendation from the MSFI committee is going to go to the next council meeting so that all the councilors have some time to digest all of the aesthetic options that came out of that MSFI meeting, because I was impressed. They really got into, in a good way, they really got into the nitty gritty aesthetic choices. Like, what do we want stoplight poles to look like? Stuff that I totally take for granted. Right. And there was a lot of good discussion around like accessibility, around things not looking too modern and keeping kind of the classic historic look of downtown. There was a lot of good public input from the community. So I think there's going to be a lot for the councilors to really percolate on.
Yeah, I agree. And we got input from the Heritage Commission about the aesthetic features for the downtown project, and we took that into consideration. So the council, every aesthetic choice they had, if the Heritage Commission had weighed in, we talked about that and why that was important. And really it came down to trying not to look too modern. The MSFI committee deserves a ton of credit. This has been a long process, and there has been a lot of decisions, a lot of input, and a lot of work for the counselors on this project. And so I was really excited that we got through it all. It was a long meeting, but they got through it all. They had consensus, and now we move forward. The fact that these final design decisions are moving forward to the council on January 2nd is separate from now when do we put it out to bid, which I think is good. So wrapping up the bid documents is important, and then moving on to that decision of, okay, when are we going to do this? And that conversation will be at the January 9th FOP, so after the January 2nd council meeting. And then the committee will be able to talk more about what sort of concerns they have with doing it this spring in May, or whether or not they should push it off a year to the following spring, and sort of the pros and cons of that. Not the least of which is price. There's so many unknowns right now. I do know one thing: nothing ever gets cheaper. It always gets more expensive.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what that means in terms of dollars, it's really hard to tell. The Public Works Director did a great job of sort of giving a range to the counselors, but there's a lot that could be changing in terms of interest rates. There's just a lot of unknowns. And so I think having this time in between to give the staff a little bit more time to think about all of those questions and then come back and have that conversation with FOP is good. If that is at the FOP meeting on the 9th, assuming on the 9th that FOP they have a recommendation related to the timing of the project, the actual decision would be voted on at the January 16th council meeting. And so we will know more very soon.
So that's exciting. I feel like the last MSFI meeting and the last council meeting, a lot got done.
Yeah, a lot got done. In addition to sort of those final design elements, Public Works Director talked about what we plan to do in terms of communicating with the community and with the businesses. And one of the things that's very unique is this idea of a project ombudsman. And the project ombudsman would be a conduit between businesses or residents that are living downtown, concerns that they may have, and then trying to work through those concerns with the city. Wouldn't be part of the contractors that are hired. It wouldn't be part of the engineers. It would be an independent person. And I think we really need that. We need someone that's just focused on communicating with the businesses and helping to resolve problems as quickly as possible. And so we've drafted a job description. We have gotten some input on that job description from some of the downtown businesses. And we finalized the job description, and we'll be putting that out pretty soon. It'll be a 20 to 25 hour position. It will be a contract that will last for the 3 years of the project. really think it's important because we need to make sure that someone is focused just on resolving those types of issues. There's so many decisions that are made every day related to a project, and things come up that are unexpected. And so having someone just focused on that will, I think, help all of us immensely.
Yeah, I love that idea. The other thing, too, the gentleman from Stantec at the MSFI committee spoke to, and I think they did a really good job describing this, is because this is such a huge project, I think there's sort of been a conception that, all of Main Street is going to be a construction zone for 3 years.
Right.
And that's not to say that the project won't be disruptive, but the way they're planning it is in phases. It's the first year is going to be around Central Square, and it'll be one half at a time, and then the next year will move down.
Yeah, Railroad Square and Gilboa Ave is phase 2, and then the last part of Main Street is phase 3.
Right.
Yeah.
The plan is that it's going to be broken up into these phases, and one half of the street and then the other. I think that helped mitigate some of those worries that, all of Main Street is going to be torn up for 3 years straight.
Yeah, I agree. And if anyone's interested in seeing exactly where those phases start and stop, there's a color-coded map on the Downtown Infrastructure Project website that will show you. And, there's a little overlap in terms of the infrastructure work underground between the phases, but it's pretty well laid out so that if you do own a business or you live in the downtown or you work in the downtown and you want to know, okay, what's phase 1 and where does that actually stop? That map will help you. The other thing, and this was a big concern, is parking. Again, parking is always a concern.
Parking is an issue.
Yeah, it really is. What we're planning to do in the contract is limit the contractor's ability to use or remove parking spaces to 25. So only 25 spaces at a time can be out of commission. That helps us ensure that there's enough parking to keep the sections that are under construction, viable, that they can continue to use spaces and have spaces available to them. And basically, the Public Works determined, working with parking, that 25 made sense as that was the largest block that we would do at a time. Like you were explaining, Asa, we move from one side to the other side and do a section at a time. And so 25 spaces seemed to be the maximum number that we really would need at one time to use. So I think that's important. But, there will be things that we'll talk with the business community about related to, how do we make sure that people can still get to their business at all times? There will be restrictions in the contract that say they have to keep the sidewalks open. They have to keep access to all of the businesses, even when they are digging up in front of that business. And so that's going to be a challenge, but it's important because we need to make sure that businesses can continue to operate.
Can I ask a question that's occurring to me now?
Yeah.
Will there be any sort of protections for accessible parking spaces?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When they look at the 25 they take out, if there's a handicap accessible space that they're removing, they'll look at whether or not there's another space available in close proximity.
Awesome.
So I think the blocks will work out okay, but that could potentially be an issue. So that is something we'll just have to keep track of. But we all have to be ambassadors for the downtown during this construction project. We all have to personally support them because their continuing in our downtown is vital to our continued success. And so, however we can do that, by go to dinner, even when it's all dug up out in front of a restaurant, or buy a gift card, during construction, because they're going to need all of our support.
Definitely. I'm going to challenge everyone who's listening to commit to continuing to shop downtown, continuing to eat downtown when the downtown project is happening, even if it is a little, you have to walk a little bit further because the parking space right in front of the restaurant isn't available. Still go to the restaurant.
Right, exactly. Or get your hair cut downtown. We have a lot of salons in the downtown area. And honestly, the Gilboa Ave parking lot is not that far. I use that lot all the time personally. So when I come downtown for an event or to do something on the weekend, I park at Gilbo. And the reason I do that is that there's long-term parking there. It's cheaper. And I can go to multiple stores. So if I want to come down and eat at a restaurant, or I want to go to the show, so maybe I have dinner and then I go to the show at the Colonial, I just leave my car in Gilbo. And it really truly isn't very far. And I understand the perception is that I have to park right in front of the business. But if we could get people to really utilize those lots, especially during construction, it'll make it easier for them. It'll make it easier for the contractor. It'll make it easier for the business.
Deputy City Manager Rebecca Landry was telling me she was trying to get her steps in. And so she parked at the Gilbo East lot, and it was 63 steps.
Oh, that's great.
So it wasn't
she
even.
Counted them. That's awesome. That's great.
It wasn't even that far. She was hoping to get more steps in. In fact, she was hoping it was a little bit further, but it really is not that far.
So I'm happy we made it to the next step. We'll see what the council does with the final design, and then we'll see what the council does in terms of the timing of the project. But we are closing in on a plan, which is exciting.
Yay. I know it's been a long process and a lot of hard work.
Yeah. I was thinking about this. I started here in 2017, and my first week of work, there was a downtown infrastructure meeting in the downtown getting public input.
Oh, my word. So you really hit the ground running.
Yes. One of the things that we're doing right now is we're trying to actually create somewhat of a timeline of all the communication and outreach that we've done so far. And, I had asked Deputy City Manager Rebecca Landry to provide some additional information. She's like, wow, that's going to be really difficult because there's been a lot and we don't necessarily categorize them like that. But between her and our public works director, we are trying to get together a little bit of a timeline to show the outreach and the communication that's been, direct mailings to businesses. It's been emails. It's been social media. It's been radio interviews. We've been on the front page of the Keene Sentinel lots of times as well. So, there's been a variety of opportunities to get the message out and to engage people. But if there's something we're missing, I'm really interested in learning that. I would love to figure out if there's something that we haven't done that we should do, or if there's somebody that has a suggestion on how you could reach people. The ombudsman will be walking business to business, and that's the best way, right? To go business to business and have face-to-face conversations. But that's a very time-consuming every time there's a meeting or an update. And so I do think that we would love suggestions on big projects like this. What do we need to do to reach a bigger audience?
Great. Is there anything else that you want to talk about while we're here?
I think that's it for me, Asa.
All right.
Yeah.
Super. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's been a long week, so I really, really appreciate your time.
Yes. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time. Thanks for listening to City of Keene in Focus. We'll see you next time.